There's this Reddit post that's been making its round, and it's titled, How to Guide Young People Away from the Chud Influencers We Jerk About.
Okay.
First of all, for those who don't know, the word chud means a gross and unappealing person. When I hear people say the name chud, I immediately think about a very old and bitter journalist. I don't know why I make that association. It's just that's the only time I ever really hear the name being said. It's just weird. Like the kind of guy who has a real issue with anyone who dares to criticize an article that he wrote, some article that barely gets any clicks, yet he wrote it with a purposefully controversial take, and now he's being clowned for it because he's acting as though he didn't expect a fiery response. Call me crazy, but it's really hard to take people like that seriously, especially when it comes to the media audience being looked down upon by the supposed media overlords. You know, the people who think they know better than the audience and act like they're the ultimate authority on everything. And posts like this are a clear example of how I imagine a lot of modern day journalists look at the layman or people who have their own opinions and their opinions happen to not align with that of the journalists or the people posting. So the first thing that this old man does, and I'm assuming he's an old man, is start bragging about his position before retiring. His whole first paragraph. And honestly, the entire opening of his post is just him patting himself on his brittle spine, letting everyone know how elite he is, how high up and desirable he was, and how important his job was. It's like he's trying to make sure people know like he was all the way up there licking other people's boots, but licking the top part of the boot, making connections, and just feeling important. So he lets everyone know that he comes from this high place, and because of that, he's more than qualified to speak on these matters. But if that were really the case, he wouldn't be on Reddit asking people how to guide young people away from chud influencers. It just seems like a strange turn to take after living that kind of life, but hey, what do I know, right? Okay, so let's start by reading his opening. That sounds wrong. So, I'm sorry. It starts off, he's like, as you may know from my biography, I'm something of a suit emeritus. And honestly, this is the first time I've ever seeing this. Like, I know what it means, but I looked it up because I like seeing new words, so I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But it reminded me, that whole phrase reminded me of the Spider-Man scene.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
That's just what I'm doing. I'm sorry. Oh my God. Okay, so it continues by saying, I'm sorry, I don't know why that's so hilarious. It's not that serious. I'm something of a suit emeritus. I have to figure out how to pronounce that correctly. But for a renewable energy firm. Even though I'm nominally retired, the board likes to call me in every once in a while to vet some interviewees in a more personal, holistic way. I'm cordial and pop culture savvy enough to catch young people off guard. It gets us unscripted responses. Those are the make or break. The higher-ups want to make sure we don't hire someone who looks good on paper, but becomes a problem once they're in the office. I've dealt with much too much of that in my prime. It never ends well. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on the part where it's like, he's pop culture savvy enough to catch young people off guard. It gets us unscripted response. Jesus Christ. Somebody actually wrote this. I'm cordial and pop culture savvy enough to catch young people off guard. Eee. It sounds so cringy, like an old man trying to be coy with young people. I don't know, for all I know, maybe he is. But the way it's written just feels like it's so disconnected and out of touch. It's just very awkward. It's very awkward. It's like he thinks he's being cool or relatable, but it's painfully clear that he's not. I wonder if people, like, see him the way he sees himself. Like he's some kind of pop culture guru who got young people figured out or something. But in reality, it just feels like he's trying too hard, just from what I'm seeing. But anyway, he continues. Those are the make or break. The higher-ups want to make sure we don't hire someone who looks good on paper, but becomes a problem once they're in the office. I've dealt with much too much of that in my prime. It never ends well. Which brings me to the other day. Okay, fair enough. You want to make sure you don't hire some weirdo. He continues by saying, I was on a Zoom call with a promising applicant, a young man, Generation Z, strong STEM credentials, a medical internship of some sort, etc. I don't remember everything. Ever since the shock, my memory isn't what it used to be.
Something of a scientist.
I don't know what shock he's talking about. But if his memory isn't what it used to be, how can we take anything he's saying in his post seriously? Like, how do we know he's not forgetting other details too? How do we know that he's not making this whole thing up because his memory is completely gone? Anyway, proceed. But what concerned me was that the boy name-dropped Asmongold, as if it were a thing to be proud of. I'm really at a loss here. You all know full well Asmongold is fundamentally incompatible with a decent person's values, so I'm afraid I may have shown my hand. I said something along the lines of, oh please, not the cockroach man. I'm dead. Oh my god, what? But the applicant seemed genuinely confused. What's wrong with him? How do we stop this sort of thing? I see it more and more these days. Part of me wants to encourage the board to vet social media more intensely, but I prefer the personal touch. Is there a way to debunk these young people in real time? It's understandable that this old man might not see the value in someone following certain social media influencers, content creators, what have you, but it's a little vague. Like when the young man or the freaking candidate guy referenced Asmongold, like, was he doing it in a specific way or just name dropping? Yeah, we can all agree that Asmongold isn't the neatest person and has issues with hoarding.
Oh God! Get him out of me! What are you doing, bro? Get out of my... Go in the garbage cans. I'm gonna take him downstairs. Give me a minute. I got him. He right? I can't.
But it sounded to me like this old man was saying, not the cockroach man, as another weird attempt to connect with this younger person pretending he's part of internet culture. It just came off with the vibe, see, I know who he is. I remember the cockroach thing. See, I know. Like, again, it's strange and awkward, but for all I know, this old man who seems to think he's so important might have a few cockroaches in his own house. How do we know he's not a hoarder as well? What's his environment like? Does he have a wife and kids? And if he has any, does his wife clean up for him and take care of him? So since we're mentioning the whole cockroach thing, yeah, it's pretty nasty to live in that kind of filth to the point where cockroaches become your freaking friends. And you're basically the living embodiment of the movie Joe's Apartment. It's freaking disgusting, bro. And you're streaming it. Like, ew.
You know how much I...
Scientist myself.
Daddy. But was the candidate, potential employee, whatever, talking about Asmongold in reference to the cockroach, or was it about something he might have said? It's important to understand the context here. It's also really interesting because it makes you wonder about people like Elvis and other older icons that people in this guy's generation look up to. I'm certain there were a bunch of people in history who dropped some bars, but if you look at their homes or personal lives, they were probably nasty as hell. How many influential rock stars like Freddie Mercury and others did a bunch of drugs, cheated on their women, and were deadbeat dads, but still produce interesting works of art? They have quotes people are still using today. Not saying it excuses their behavior, but it's okay to admit when someone drops an interesting perspective. For example, this guy making the post, if he's telling the truth and not delusional, probably did a lot of good for the industry. Even though his post might come across as him seeming like an overly egotistical person. I mean, he could be lying about his credentials, right? Credentials. I just woke up, leave me alone. If he really has that much experience in life, why would he need to be on Reddit? Like, we know why we do, but like, it just feels like there's this disconnect. I don't know. I'm not saying people shouldn't use Reddit, but you don't get the irony of the whole thing. I'm sure there's a bunch of other old people like him or young people with no life experience giving him inspiration or ideas on how to debunk young people in real time. But you know, someone with that much experience, like with the whole first paragraph and the way that he presents himself, you would think that they would have that much experience based on what they said, to the point where they would have the ability to do that, the very thing that they're asking other people to help them do, especially when you consider that he's savvy enough to catch young people off guard. Just saying. So look, I'm not here defending Asmongold or anything, but this old dude is seriously out of touch. He's asking Reddit how to stop this sort of thing and wanting to have the board vet social media more intensely. You know, that's what he said. Vet social media more intensely. Like it's some kind of problem. I mean, seriously, it's not just a misguided thing to say. It's actually kind of harmful and borderline discriminatory. And I'll tell you why. Just because someone enjoys a YouTuber or influencer doesn't mean they should be disqualified from a job. It's like this dude thinks that if you watch certain things, you're automatically a bad hire. It's honestly really ridiculous. Like, people should be judged on what they bring to the table, not on whether or not they watch a certain freaking YouTuber. This guy's literally about to make hiring decisions based on whether someone's taste in entertainment matches his outdated views. It feels like it's all about control with this person trying to impose his values on everybody else. But it's 2025. Maybe you should just let people have their own interests without turning it into a hiring decision. I mean, those two things don't have to be one and the same. And I know people are going to try and make the distinction and excuse that, but Altieri, maybe people that are watching harmful cult YouTubers who, they push harmful rhetoric and whatever. Okay, first of all, who exactly determines what is harmful? There's so much of that going on nowadays where someone disagrees with some other person and immediately wants to ruin their life or cancel them because they don't agree with them. And they call it harmful to push that across, especially when they're the ones deciding what's offensive and what's not. Secondly, this could easily become a form of censorship. If people are watching different forms of media to get various perspectives, for whatever reason they're watching it, you're basically telling them they can't get hired for a job just because of that, like them just dropping a name. Like if I mentioned that I watched a video from Vaush just to get a different perspective, which I have in the past, and I quoted something he said a long time ago, would I not get hired because I watched him or quoted something he said because people now know he wants to fuck people as a horse? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Do you see how slippery this slope becomes? Now you're discouraging conversation. The young man opened up and invited conversation, but because you don't agree with this young dude or the stem cell potential hiree watching Asmongold, you're now ready to not hire him even though he's a promising candidate? You're completely overlooking his merit and everything that makes him a good employee or a potential good employee just because he finds Asmongold entertaining. Does that really have anything to do with the job or the job description? Yes, we agree. Asmongold might not have the best hygiene. Sure. But does simply referencing his name or watching his videos have anything to do with the job you're hiring this kid for? Is it really irrelevant? And what exactly did that guy mean by if boards start vetting social media more intensely, or he's partly in favor of that on one hand? By even bringing up the idea of vetting social media, you're showing a pretty strong desire to control people. It almost sounds like you're trying to indoctrinate people into what you find suitable, what you think they should watch, or what you find interesting. It's very disturbing. So I started scrolling down because this is crazy, and people are even wondering if this post is fake, but other people started asking the same questions I'm asking towards OP, and somebody finally came out and asked him, what exactly are you trying to bunk? Asmongold is simple-minded, but he's not exactly dangerous or ambitious. Maybe it's time to retire for good. You could spend more time on not getting invited to anything. Damn. Now, yeah, it was insulting for him to add that last part, and I know I'm poking fun at the old dude too, but I mean, what did you expect with this kind of post? You're basically advocating for not hiring people based on the YouTubers they might watch or the names they might happen to mention in conversation. People might take that as being pretty vitriolic, which is, ironic based on what he replied. So the OP says he might not be considered dangerous. I've not watched him. I only know him by reputation through the circle jerk side of this community, but he often associates with those who are. Why such a flippant and rude reply? Be a nicer human, please. There's enough vitriol in today's world. I mean, yeah, maybe that person could have been a nicer human, but mister, you could be a nicer human too, because you're at least honest enough to admit that you haven't even watched Asmongold, something that others have been calling out throughout the post. You mentioned that you only know him by reputation through the circle jerk side of this community, as this person is pointing out, right? So you really don't know anything about him. So how can you come onto this post and act like you have all this knowledge? How can you act like you're on some high moral ground and try to stop people from watching someone that you know nothing about or his perspectives or what he stands for? But you're supposed to be someone with experience, and you're this kind of person who is responsible for hiring people? You see how that's a problem? I really do love that people are calling him out. And see, even people are pointing out his hypocrisy. They're like, be a nicer human, please. You're literally talking about how you're negatively judging everyone you meet who mentions a name because a bunch of people on a circle jerk subreddit told you to, right? He is admittedly negatively judging someone based on a person's name that they happen to mention in passing. And other people are saying like, oh, if you're going to object to the media that's important to a young person you want to influence, is it not the least you could do to gain some firsthand familiarity with said media? Bruh. The embarrassing thing is that I'm pretty sure a lot of the people replying to his post are probably 20 years his junior or more. And yet they have the wisdom and common sense to give him the basic advice that he should know on his own. These are the people who want to influence the youth, by the way. People like the person who made this post. The same people who claim that he hasn't watched someone he's already deemed a bad person, but still want to influence and debunk the youth. Make this make sense.
How old are you?
Guess.
Guess these nuts.
Report back to me when, I don't know, when it makes sense.
I know we laugh about this and it's entertaining and everything, but it's honestly kind of worrying. And people are right to say that it's crazy how this guy has a power over other people's livelihoods. That's something that should make anybody feel uncomfortable or uneasy. And yes, he is in fact a hypocrite. And that's why nobody takes people like him seriously. He's sitting here judging others for their personal interests, yet he can't even be bothered to get the full picture himself. He doesn't even want to go the full yard and do his homework to influence people or put in the basic work required to do so. How are we supposed to trust someone with that kind of judgment? The thing is, people like this will phase out of relevance and influence over time. Posts like the one that he made only make it worse because they just reinforce the idea that the youth are moving away from people like him. Clearly, he has nothing of value to offer besides his bitterness, lack of self-awareness, his self-importance, and egotistical hypocrisy. He's probably so used to having everything handed to him in his own little social jerk community that when anything from outside challenges him or makes him look small, he wants to control or destroy it. That kind of perspective is exactly why people are trying to move away from stuff like that, from people like him. It's exactly the kind of outdated and narrow-minded thinking people just don't want. They're tired of it. They're tired of some old person saying, well, you know, I don't know anything about this thing I don't want you to watch, but I just don't want you to watch it anyway. Let's try and censor it so you could just listen to what I say. Everybody in history that I've ever tried that tactic, it's always failed. People will always rebel against that because I know it sounds stupid, but humans don't really like when people tell them to just follow something that doesn't make sense. Maybe a lot of them do, but the majority of them over time, eventually they don't. They don't like that. Anyway, what are your perspectives? Do you see it an issue when people are just consuming certain media just to get different perspectives? I would want to know the details of this, like what is the nature of the conversation? Because if we're just taking this superficially at face value, it feels like this person is coming off like an idiot. I'm sorry. He just comes off like a freaking vapid idiot. And if they didn't hire this person just based on that, you screwed yourself. And at this point in time, I would say that you're trying to either sabotage the company that you're working for, or you're at the age right now where your service probably should never be required again if this is how you're making your hiring decisions. Just saying.